Now let's get into punctuations. To begin with, period and semicolon. Period has only one use, which is to end a sentence. For example, Jack won, and then a period. Semicolon has just one use, which is to join two independent clauses. For example, this sentence. Professor entered the class is an independent clause. See, a thought that can stand alone. And then, the students were waiting is another independent thought. It can stand alone. So, two independent clauses duly joined by a semicolon. Next punctuation, the most important of all, comma. Comma has many, many uses. Here we will be discussing the most important ones for GMAT. Comma is used to separate items in a list. For example, look at this sentence. You have Rose can speak. Now a list of languages, English, French, and German. Since it is a list of more than two elements, we have a comma here, the Oxford comma. Next usage of comma is to join two independent clauses. Remember, comma followed by a conjunction can join two independent clauses. Alone, comma is not strong enough to join two independent clauses. But comma together with a conjunction, these 7 conjunctions called fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, can together join two independent clauses. The most important of these is the comma and construction. All these terms lead to the power of a semicolon. Let's take an example here. We have an independent clause from here. Jack has great soccer skills. So, until here, this is an independent clause. And then, comma and here, which has the power of a semicolon. So all these terms, comma and, comma but, have the power of a semicolon. All of these 7 terms here, fanboys. Next, a comma can be used to join a dependent clause and an independent clause. Comma is not strong enough to join two independent clauses, but it is strong enough a punctuation to join one dependent clause. You see, from here to here, this is a dependent clause, and one independent clause. So a dependent clause and an independent clause joined by a simple comma. Next usage of a comma is to link a modifying phrase with its relevant noun. Very, very important. Look at this example here. From here to here, this is a modifying phrase. This will refer to the noun that comes after the comma. Conscious about fitness, Henry. So, Henry is conscious about fitness. A very, very important construction. This bit could have been the other way as well. First, the relevant noun comes, and then the modifying phrase comes. This is equally good. Conscious about his fitness is describing Henry. Between these two commas, you have some extra information about Henry, and the key message is that Henry swims every day. Next usage of a comma is to show cause-effect relationships. Let's understand this through an example. You see, this part of the sentence is the cause. Scientists discovered a vaccine, and the following part is the effect. So, cause, comma, effect. This construction, introduction of a present participle, the verb plus ing after a comma shows a cause-effect relationship. Otherwise, imagine multiple words would be needed. Something like, scientists discovered a vaccine and as a result, put an end to the epidemic. This construction here, simply a comma and then a present participle, concisely conveys a cause-effect relationship. Very, very important on GMAT. It could be the other way also. Look at this example here. The present participle comes first. So, discovering a vaccine, and since present participle has come here you have past participle, and here is the cause part. Then you have the effect part. Here, cause, comma, effect. So, both the constructions are fine for showing a cause-effect relationship. Next, let's understand the Oxford comma. Oxford comma is the comma used before the last element in a list of 3 or more elements. This is marked by a comma followed by an and. Look at this example. Jack plays soccer, tennis, and football. Since it is a list of 3 elements, 1, 2, 3 here, you have the Oxford comma followed by and. And if it were just 2 elements, Jack plays soccer and tennis, of course there would be no comma involved. But if it is a list of 3 or more, the last element would have a comma and before it. One more example. Lily is a fine singer. First element, a skilled martial artist. Second element, and a practicing lawyer. Third element. Therefore, before the last element, the third element, you have this comma and construction reflecting the Oxford comma. Remember, if it is a list of many more elements also, for example, if it is a list of, let's say, 5 elements and E, then you need a comma before the last element. This is the Oxford comma, and this also applies to a list that ends with an or. Okay, A, B, C, D, or E. This comma or construction here represents the Oxford comma. Next, please don't confuse the Oxford comma with the comma plus and construction for joining two independent clauses. As we saw in the last slide, a comma plus and can be used for joining two independent clauses. So this construction is different. This is for joining two independent clauses. This comma and construction does not represent an Oxford comma construction. This comma and is for joining two independent clauses. Remember, a comma alone is not strong enough for joining two independent clauses. This second sentence here is incorrect. It suffers from the problem of comma splice. We will talk about comma splice in detail later in this session. Next, let's understand the usage of a pair of commas. A pair of commas is generally used to convey extra, non-essential meaning in a sentence. Look at this sentence. The stuff that you have between two commas here is extra information. If you remove this, we get Brussels has many churches. The core meaning is intact. Usage of colon. The first usage of colon is to introduce a list. Look at this example. There are 4 natural states of matter, and then the list follows: solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. And see, to introduce the list, we have a colon here. The second usage of colon is to introduce an explanation or definition. Look at this example. The least understood state of matter is plasma, and then what follows here is an explanation. See, to introduce the explanation, we have a colon here. Next, colon is used to introduce an answer or solution. Look at this example. The plan is simple, and then the answer of sorts. What is the plan? Work hard comes next, and you see a colon has been used to introduce the answer. So 3 uses overall: to introduce a list, to introduce an explanation or definition, and to introduce an answer or solution. Next punctuation is dash. A dash can, first of all, be very well used like a colon. So the first use of dash is that it can be used to introduce a list. Look at this example. There are 4 natural states of matter, and then the list follows. The second usage is to introduce an explanation or definition. Once again, a colon could have very well worked here. And third usage, to introduce an answer or solution. Once again, dash works here. A colon could have very well worked here. Then a pair of dashes very well work like brackets. Look at this example here. World's 3 most populous countries. And then you see names of these 3 countries have come here. Imagine a pair of brackets could have very well worked. However, brackets do not look aesthetically pleasing in a sentence. I have never seen brackets on a GMAT sentence correction question. So in place of brackets, the pair of dashes works very well, and the core meaning continues. World's 3 most populous countries. You can very well skip the information between the 2 dashes here, and the core meaning is that world's 3 most populous countries contribute to approximately 40% of the total human population. Now, last 2 consecutive dashes. Any idea what this is? This simply means namely. So, when you see 2 consecutive dashes in a sentence, just ask yourself whether replacing the dashes with namely would lead to a proper sentence. Look at this example here. There are 4 natural states of matter, namely solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. The sentence makes sense, and therefore the usage is correct. This was the concept, friends. GMAT shots are deliberately kept brief. For an elaborate explanation, please watch the Stage 1 conceptual videos in our program. Thanks for watching.